The mantle fell from Kendra Wyther's trembling fingers for the third time that evening, and she swore under her breath as she bent to retrieve it from the loom room floor. "Steady," she whispered to herself, though her hands refused to obey. They had shaken like this only once before. 2 years past, when Finn Pardoe had looked up from shoeing her cart pony and met her eyes without a trace of the revulsion she had learned to expect from human faces. He had simply nodded, checked the fit of the shoe with careful fingers, and asked if she wanted the next hoof trimmed shorter for the rocky ground out by Thornmere. She had stammered something that might have been yes, paid him with coins that rattled against each other in her shaking palm, and fled. Now here she stood in the back room of the Pardoe smithy, lamplight pooling gold across the loom where Finn had been teaching himself to weave for the better part of 4 months. The shuttle lay abandoned beside a cup of cold tea. The mantle itself hung half-finished on the frame, cream wool striped with the deep blue and russet that marked the Pardoe household since before the conquest. She had not known he was making it. She had not known he could weave at all. "You should not have come looking for me," Finn said from the doorway, and Kendra spun so fast her braid whipped across her shoulder. He stood with one hand braced against the frame, soot still darkening his forearms from the day's work, his brown hair falling into eyes that looked as tired as she had ever seen them. "Your mother said you were working late." The words came out thin. "I brought the shears you wanted mended. The spring was loose. I know what was wrong with them. I broke them myself last week." He stepped into the room and closed the door behind him with the care of a man who did not want the house to hear. "I gave them to you because I needed an excuse." "An excuse," Kendra repeated, and hated how her voice cracked on the second syllable. Finn crossed to the loom and laid one hand on the mantle, his fingers tracing the pattern she now recognized from the cloth that hung above the Pardoe hearth. "My grandmother wove that one. My mother wove hers. The tradition is that a bride receives her hearth mantle from her husband's hands, made in the household she is entering." He looked up, and the lamplight caught the uncertainty in his expression. "I have been trying to learn since Candlemas. I am not very good." "It is beautiful," Kendra said, because it was. The weave was tight and even, the colors rich as autumn moorland. Her hands had stopped shaking and gone numb instead. "It is for you." Finn lifted the mantle free of the loom with the reverence other men reserved for holy relics. "If you will have it, if you will have me." Kendra opened her mouth and no sound emerged. She tried again. "Finn, I know what you are." His voice was steady, patient as the day he had shod her pony, as all the days since when he had found reasons to walk past her cottage or stop at the market when she was selling wool or ask her opinion on a horse's gait. "I have known since the first time I saw you at the Candlemas fire, and you stood apart from everyone else, because you thought they did not want you near. I have known since you brought your pony, and your hands shook so hard I thought you might drop the lead. I have known since every day after when I looked for you and found reasons to be near you and hoped you might look back." "I have looked back," Kendra whispered. "I have done nothing but look back for 2 years, but you cannot mean this. Your family knows." Finn took a step closer, the mantle folded over his arm. "I told them at Yuletide. My mother cried and then helped me set up the loom. My father asked if I was certain and then showed me how to tension the warp threads. My sister said it was about time because she was tired of watching me moon about like a kicked hound." Despite everything, Kendra felt a laugh bubble up in her throat. "Your sister has a sharp tongue." "She does." Finn held out the mantle, and his hands were shaking now too, just faintly. "Wear this and you are mine. That is what my grandmother told my grandfather when she gave him his. It is not a command. It is a promise. That whoever wears the marks of this house belongs to it, and it to them, and no law or custom or any other damned thing can break that. Kendra's vision blurred. She blinked hard and the tears fell anyway, hot tracks down her green cheeks. There will be consequences. People will not accept this. Let them try not accepting it. Finn's voice hardened. I am done pretending I do not love you. I am done watching you walk alone. I am done waking up in the morning and knowing the only thing wrong with my life is that you are not in it. The entail, Kendra said desperately. Your uncle said at the market that the farm is held under condition of marriage. If you marry outside the approved families, then my Uncle Gareth inherits and I lose 300 acres of moorland I never wanted in the first place. Finn shook his head. I am a farrier, Kendra. I have a trade. I can work anywhere there are horses. The farm was always going to be a burden. It is your family's land. Generations. It is dirt and stone and soggy grass that grows nothing but sheep ticks. He said it with the flat conviction of someone who had spent months coming to terms with a hard truth. My family is here in this room. You are my family if you will have me. Kendra looked at him, this quiet man who had learned to weave badly and then well, who had calloused his hands on shuttle and thread as well as iron and forge, who stood now with his heart in his hands and his future balanced on her answer. She thought of the cottage where she lived alone, the sheep she tended for wages because no one would sell her land, the years of standing apart and walking careful and swallowing the small cruelties that came with green skin and tusks in a parish that barely tolerated her presence. She thought of Finn's hand steady on her pony's hoof, his nod across the market, the day he had helped her catch a ewe in labor and knelt in the mud beside her without hesitation, the way he looked at her like she was something precious. Yes, she said, and her hands were shaking again as she reached for the mantle. Yes. Finn's face transformed. He unfolded the cloth and held it open, and Kendra turned so he could settle it across her shoulders. The wool was soft and heavy, still smelling faintly of the lanolin that had not quite washed out. It fell to her knees in the traditional style, the blue and russet stripes bold against her worn work dress. Finn's hands lingered on her shoulders for a moment before he stepped back. You are beautiful, he said quietly. I should have told you before. I should have told you 1,000 times. Kendra turned to face him, clutching the edges of the mantle. I did not think humans saw orcs that way. I am not humans. I am just me. Finn reached out tentatively, and when she did not pull away, he cupped her face in his palm. His thumb brushed the curve of her small tusk, careful and curious. And I see you exactly as you are. She leaned into his touch, her eyes falling shut. What do we do now? Now we tell the parish clerk we intend to marry. We post the banns. We weather whatever storm comes. His hand slid down to take hers, lacing their fingers together. And we start looking for a place of our own, because I will not have you living in that drafty cottage through another winter. I have lived there for 5 years, and you have been cold for all of them. I have seen you at market in February with your cloak wrapped double. He squeezed her hand. I can do better than that. We can do better. Kendra opened her eyes and looked down at their joined hands, green and brown, scarred from work and steady together. Your uncle will fight this. My uncle can rot. The venom in Finn's voice startled her. He has been circling the farm like a crow since my father died. He does not care about the land. He cares about selling it to the coal speculators from Manchester. Is that legal under the entail? Probably not. But that has never stopped Gareth from doing exactly what he pleased. Finn sighed. I went to see the parish clerk last month. Mr. Hewitt says the entail is old enough that it might be challenged, but it would take a court and a lawyer and money I do not have. Then we will manage without the farm. Kendra said it firmly, trying to make herself believe it. You are right. You have a trade. I can handle dogs and sheep. We will find a way. Finn pulled her close, mantle and all, and rested his forehead against hers. I do not deserve you. You learned to weave for me. I think that makes us even. He laughed, the sound low and warm. My fingers still have splinters from the shuttle. I kept dropping the damned thing. I drop things when my hands shake, Kendra said. We are both clumsy. We are perfect, Finn corrected, and then he kissed her, soft and careful and full of 2 years of wanting. Kendra kissed him back and felt the world narrow to the warmth of his mouth, and the steady circle of his arms and the weight of the mantle proclaiming that she belonged somewhere at last. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Finn rested his forehead against hers again. I want to do this right. I want the bands and the church and the blessing. I want everyone to see. They will talk. Let them. He pulled back just far enough to meet her eyes. I have spent my whole life being quiet and careful and doing what was expected. I am done. You are the only thing I want, and I am not hiding it. Kendra felt something fierce and bright kindle in her chest. When do we tell the clerk? Tomorrow, Finn smiled. Unless you want to wait. I have waited 2 years. I am done waiting too. They stood together in the lamplight, the loom casting long shadows on the wall, and made their plans. The parish clerk, Mr. Hewitt, was a thin man with ink-stained fingers and a habit of peering over his spectacles like a suspicious heron. He listened to Finn's declaration of intent with his face carefully neutral, made notes in his ledger, and then set down his pen with a click. You understand the conditions of the entail on Thornmere Farm, he said. It was not a question. I do. Finn kept his voice level. And you understand that your Uncle Gareth Pardoe stands to inherit under those conditions. I do. Mr. Hewitt's gaze flicked to Kendra, who stood beside Finn with the hearth mantle folded over her arm. She had worn it walking through the village, and the stairs had followed them like a cold wind. Miss Wyther, you are aware of the social consequences of this union. I am, Kendra said quietly. Very well. Mr. Hewitt picked up his pen again. The banns will be read for 3 consecutive Sundays. If no lawful impediment is raised, you may marry on the 4th week. He paused, then added in a softer tone, I will note that the entail's marriage provisions are archaic and of questionable enforceability under current law. However, challenging them would require a chancery suit, which is both costly and slow. We are not challenging anything, Finn said. We are simply marrying. Indeed. Mr. Hewitt made another note. I will inform Mr. Gareth Pardoe of the banns as a courtesy, given his interest in the property. He will already know, Kendra murmured. The whole village will know by sunset. She was right. By the time they left the clerk's office, 3 women had stopped their conversation to watch them pass, and old Tom Bridger had made a sign against evil that he did not bother to hide. Finn took Kendra's hand and held it where everyone could see. Let them look, he said. Kendra's fingers tightened on his. I knew it would be like this. It will not always be. Finn glanced down at her. People will adjust, and if they do not, we will find a place where they do not care. Do such places exist? If they do not, we will make one. They walked back through the village in silence, past the church where the banns would be read, past the market square where Kendra sold wool and Finn shod horses, past the inn where Gareth Pardoe was known to drink away his afternoons. The man himself stood outside the inn door, arms crossed, watching them approach with eyes like chips of flint. Nephew, Gareth said. He did not acknowledge Kendra at all. I hear congratulations are in order. You heard correctly. Finn did not slow his pace. You are certain about this? There is still time to reconsider. Gareth's tone was oily with false concern. A young man's infatuation can lead him to poor decisions. Finn stopped walking. Kendra felt his hand tense in hers. My decisions are none of your concern, Uncle. Thornmere is my concern. It is family land. It should stay in family hands. It will, until the day I marry, and then it is yours to do with as you please. Finn's voice was flat. I am sure the coal speculators will be delighted. Gareth's expression flickered. Who told you that? Does it matter? You are not even subtle about it. Finn started walking again, pulling Kendra with him. Enjoy the farm, Uncle. I hope it brings you everything you deserve. They left Gareth standing in the street, his face mottled with anger. Kendra waited until they were out of earshot before she spoke. He is dangerous. Men like that do not accept defeat. He has already won. He gets the farm. Finn's jaw was tight. What more can he do? I do not know, Kendra said, but I do not trust him. Over the following days they began to search for a new place. The farm at Thornmere would be forfeit the moment they married, so Finn gave notice to his mother that he would be leaving. She wept and hugged him hard, then turned and hugged Kendra just as fiercely. You take care of him, Mrs. Pardoe said, her eyes wet. He is too stubborn to take care of himself. I know, Kendra said, surprised to find herself smiling. I will try. Finn's sister, Eliza, was more pragmatic. There is a cottage for rent up on Hartley Moor, she said. Old Ben Carter died last autumn and his son wants a tenant. It has a good stone shed that could be a forge if you set it up right. The road to the coaching inn passes within a quarter mile. How much is the rent? Finn asked. £4 a year, plus you keep the stone walls in repair. Eliza looked between them. It is smaller than Thornmere and twice as bleak, but it is yours if you want it. We want it, Kendra said immediately. If Finn agrees. Finn nodded. Can you introduce us to Carter's son? By the end of the week, they had walked out to see the cottage. It was small and square and built of the same gray stone as the walls that parceled the moor into sheep runs. The roof was slate and sound. The windows were narrow against the wind. The shed Eliza had mentioned was big enough for a forge and an anvil, and not much else. It is perfect, Finn said, and Kendra saw that he meant it. His eyes were bright as he paced off the dimensions of the shed, already planning where the bellows would go and how to vent the smoke. I can be working within a month, 2 at most. Kendra stood in the doorway of the cottage and looked out across the moor. The land rolled away in shades of brown and gray-green, dotted with sheep and cut by the track that led toward the coaching road. The wind was cold and steady and smelled of wet stone. It was the loneliest place she had ever seen. It was home. There is room for a garden, she said, and I can take in sheep herding work. The farmers up here always need help during lambing. Finn came to stand beside her, his arm slipping around her waist. Are you certain? It is not much. It is ours. Kendra leaned into him. That is enough. They shook hands with young Mr. Carter, paid the first quarter's rent, and walked back to the village with their future settled. The first banns were read that Sunday, and the church was fuller than usual with people who wanted to witness the scandal. The vicar read the words in a dry, uninflected voice, and Kendra sat in the back pew with her hands clenched in her lap and felt every eye on her. Finn sat beside his mother in the Pardoe family pew, his back straight and his gaze fixed on the altar. When the vicar finished, there was a rustle of whispers like wind through dry grass. Gareth Pardoe stood in the front row, his face set and grim. After the service, Finn found Kendra outside and took her hand again. 1 down, he said. 2 to go. The second Sunday was easier. Fewer people came to stare, and the whispers had less venom. Finn and Kendra walked to the cottage on Hartley Moor afterward and began cleaning. The place had stood empty through the winter, and there were birds' nests in the chimney and mice droppings on the floor. They swept and scrubbed and aired the rooms until their hands were raw. We need furniture, Finn said, looking around the bare main room. A table, chairs. A bed. Kendra flushed at the last word but nodded. I have some money saved, not much but enough for basics. I can build what we need. Finn ran a hand through his hair, leaving a streak of soot. I am better with iron than wood, but I can manage. They worked together through the week, carrying supplies up from the village, setting up the forge, making the cottage livable. Finn's mother sent a basket of kitchen things. His sister sent blankets, and the vicar's wife, to everyone's surprise, sent a loaf of bread and a pot of jam with a note that said only, "For your hearth." She is a good woman, Kendra said, reading the note. She is one of the few who will speak to you after we marry, Finn replied, but there was no bitterness in his voice. We will remember her kindness. The third Sunday came, and the banns were read for the final time. Pardoe was not in church, which should have been a relief. Instead, Kendra felt a prickle of unease that stayed with her through the service and the walk back to the village. Where is your uncle? She asked Finn. I do not know, and I do not care. Finn glanced at her. Why? He has been too quiet. Men like him do not accept loss without a fight. There is nothing he can do. The banns are read. We marry next week, he inherits the farm, and that is the end of it. Finn squeezed her hand. You are worrying over nothing. But Kendra could not shake the feeling that a storm was gathering just out of sight. The storm broke 3 days before the wedding. Mr. Hewitt sent a runner to the smithy asking Finn to come to his office immediately. Finn went, and Kendra waited at the cottage with her stomach in knots until he returned 2 hours later, his face white with fury. What happened? She demanded. My uncle has produced a codicil to the entail. Finn's voice shook. Dated 18 months ago, signed by my father and witnessed by 2 men from the village. It changes the terms. The farm does not go to Gareth if I marry outside the approved list. It goes to the church. Kendra stared at him. The church, to be administered by the parish for the relief of the poor. Finn laughed, a bitter sound. Which means Gareth gets nothing. He thought he was inheriting, and now he stands to lose it all. But if your father signed it, my father was dying 18 months ago. He could barely hold a pen, and I never saw any codicil, neither did my mother or Eliza. Finn paced the small room like a caged animal. Hewitt says if the document is genuine, it takes precedence. The farm goes to the church the moment we marry. Then it is forfeit either way, Kendra said slowly. Whether Gareth inherits or the church does, you still lose Thornmere. Yes, but Gareth loses too, and that is the part that does not make sense. Finn stopped pacing. Why would he produce a document that costs him the farm? Unless he plans to challenge it after we marry, Kendra said. Claim it was forged or invalid. Get the church's claim overturned and take the farm anyway. Finn's eyes widened. That cunning bastard. Can we prove it is a forgery? Not unless we can show my father did not sign it. And he is 2 years dead. Finn sank onto the bench they had built together. Hewitt is examining the document now. He says it looks legitimate, but he is not a lawyer. Kendra sat beside him, her mind racing. Who were the witnesses? Tom Bridger and Peter Voss, both men Gareth drinks with. Finn rubbed his face. If they are in on it, they will swear the signature is real. Would they lie under oath? For enough money, probably. Finn looked at her, and the despair in his eyes made her chest ache. I do not know what to do. If we marry, the farm goes to the church, and Gareth will spend the next 5 years in court trying to overturn it. If we do not marry, he inherits directly. Either way, we lose. Either way, he loses too, Kendra pointed out. That is something. Cold comfort. Finn took her hand. I do not care about the farm, you know that, but I hate being outmaneuvered by that scheming weasel. Then we outmaneuver him back. Kendra stood, pulling Finn up with her. We go to Mr. Hewitt and we ask to see the codicil. We look at every inch of it. And we find the mistake Gareth made, because men like him always make mistakes. Finn looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, let us go. They walked back to the village through the spring twilight, the moor stretching dark and silent around them. Mr. Hewitt was still in his office, poring over the codicil by lamplight. He looked up when they entered, his expression grave. Miss Wyther, Mr. Pardoe, I was about to send for you again. He gestured to the document spread on his desk. I have been examining this codicil, and I have found something troubling. Kendra and Finn crowded close to look. The codicil was written in a cramped hand on good paper, the ink dark and clear. The signature at the bottom read Thomas Pardoe in a shaky script that might have been the hand of a dying man. What did you find? Finn asked. Mr. Hewitt pointed to the date at the top of the document. This is dated the 15th of October, 2 years past. Correct, if you say so. I do, because I have here the parish register which I consulted this afternoon. Mr. Hewitt opened a large leather-bound book and turned it so they could see. The 15th of October, 2 years past, was a Sunday. Your father was buried that morning. I officiated at the funeral myself. Kendra felt her breath catch. Beside her, Finn went very still. The witnesses, he said hoarsely. Bridger and Voss. They were at the funeral. I remember seeing them. As do I. Mr. Hewitt's voice was dry as old paper. Which makes it rather remarkable that they witnessed your father's signature on a legal document several hours after we laid him in the ground. It is a forgery, Finn said. It has to be. That is my assessment as well. However, proving it will require more than my word. Mr. Hewitt closed the register with a thump. I will need to consult with the magistrate, and I will need to examine the original entail to compare the signatures. Forgery is a serious crime, Mr. Pardoe. If your uncle did this, he will face prosecution. Good, Finn said with cold satisfaction. He deserves it. I will send word to the magistrate tonight. In the meantime, I recommend you proceed with your wedding as planned. Mr. Hewitt allowed himself a thin smile. The codicil is invalid, which means the original entail stands. The farm will go to Mr. Gareth Pardoe when you marry. But if we can prove he forged this document, a court may set aside the entire entail as tainted by fraud. Kendra's heart leaped. The farm would go to Finn, possibly. It would be up to a judge. But it is a far better outcome than watching the land go to a forger. Mr. Hewitt began gathering the documents. Leave this with me. I will write to the magistrate tonight and send a copy of my findings to the diocesan court as well. The church has an interest in this matter, given that the forged codicil named them as beneficiaries. They left the clerk's office in a daze. Outside, the stars were coming out over the moor, cold and bright. Finn stopped in the middle of the street and turned to Kendra, his hands framing her face. We are still marrying in 3 days, he said. It was not a question. Yes, Kendra said, we are. Even if Gareth inherits, even if the courts take years, even if she kissed him to stop the words, even if all of that, I do not care about the farm, Finn, I care about you. I love you, he said against her mouth. I do not say it enough, I love you. I love you too. Kendra pulled back, smiling through the tears that had started without her noticing. Now take me home. They walked back to the cottage on Hartley Moor, where the forge was ready and the furniture was rough but solid, and the bed they had built together waited under the eaves. They did not speak of Gareth or entails or forgeries. They talked instead about the wedding, about where they would stand, and what Kendra would wear and whether Finn's mother would cry through the whole ceremony. She will, Finn said with certainty. She cried at Eliza's wedding, and Eliza was only marrying a farmer from the next village over. This is a bit more dramatic, Kendra pointed out. Only a bit. Finn grinned at her, and the tension of the day finally broke. They laughed together in the dark cottage, and Kendra felt the future settling into place like the last stone in a wall. The magistrate arrived 2 days later, a stern man named Halifax who came with a clerk and a set of law books and a determination to see justice done. He examined the forged codicil, compared the signature to other documents signed by Thomas Pardoe, and interviewed Mr. Hewitt and the vicar and Finn's mother. By the end of the day, he had issued a warrant for Gareth Pardoe's arrest. The constable found Gareth at the inn, drinking whiskey and gambling with Peter Voss and Tom Bridger. All 3 men were taken into custody. The forgery was too obvious to deny once the magistrate pointed out the date, and within an hour, Voss had broken and confessed to witnessing a signature he knew was false. Bridger followed shortly after. Gareth said nothing, but his silence was as good as a confession. They will be tried at the assizes next month, Magistrate Halifax told Finn and Kendra in Mr. Hewitt's office. Forgery is a hanging offense, though I suspect the judge will show leniency given that no property actually changed hands. Transportation, most likely, or a term in the hulks. And the farm? Finn asked quietly. The entail is void. Your uncle's attempt to defraud the church and manipulate the inheritance has tainted the entire document beyond repair. Halifax looked over his spectacles. The land reverts to you, Mr. Pardoe, as your father's legitimate heir. You will need to file a claim with the Chancery Court, but it is a formality. The property is yours. Kendra felt Finn's hand tighten on hers. Even if I marry Miss Wyther, especially if you marry Miss Wyther, the entail that forbade it is void. Halifax's stern expression softened slightly. You are free to marry whomever you choose, young man. I suggest you do so before anyone else tries to interfere. They married the next day, a day earlier than planned, in the small stone church with the vicar's wife and Finn's family as witnesses. Kendra wore the hearth mantle over her best dress, the blue and russet stripes bright in the candlelight. Finn wore his father's coat and a white shirt his mother had pressed until it gleamed. They spoke their vows in steady voices, and when the vicar pronounced them married, Finn kissed her so thoroughly that his sister whistled and his mother burst into tears. I told you she would cry, Finn murmured against Kendra's mouth. You were right, Kendra said, and kissed him again. The wedding breakfast was held at the Pardoe house, a simple meal of bread and cheese and cold meat, and the last of the winter apples. Eliza toasted them with cider, and Finn's mother gave Kendra a set of silver spoons that had been in the family for 3 generations. You are my daughter now, she said, her eyes still wet. These belong to you. Kendra held the spoons carefully, their weight solid and real in her palms. I will treasure them, thank you. Take care of my boy. Mrs. Pardoe hugged her again, fierce and quick. He is a good man, but he works too hard and forgets to eat. I will feed him, Kendra promised, and felt the last of her fear dissolve. This was family. This was home. They stayed through the afternoon, talking and laughing and fielding questions from Eliza about when they would start producing nieces and nephews. When the sun began to sink toward the moor, Finn stood and took Kendra's hand. We should go, he said. We have a long walk. Not that long, Eliza teased, unless you plan to take the scenic route. Finn ignored her. He thanked his mother, hugged his sister, and led Kendra out into the spring evening. The air was soft and smelled of new grass. They walked hand in hand through the village, past the church and the inn and the market square and out onto the moor road. Are we going to the cottage? Kendra asked, eventually. Finn glanced at her, smiling. I want to stop at Thornmere first. I want to see it with you as mine, as ours. They walked the last mile as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Thornmere came into view, the farmhouse solid and gray, The barns clustered around it like sheep. The fields stretched away on all sides, 300 acres of good land that had been in Finn's family since his great-great-grandfather had claimed it from the moor. Finn stopped at the gate and looked at it for a long moment. Then he turned to Kendra. "I do not want to live here," he said. Kendra blinked. "What? I do not want to farm. I never have. I am a farrier. I want to work iron and shoe horses and build things." Finn looked back at the farm. "This land deserves someone who will love it, someone who wants to tend it. What will you do with it? Sell it, I think. Or lease it to someone who wants to farm." Finn pulled her close. "Use the money to build a proper forge at the cottage, buy tools, maybe hire an apprentice in a few years, make a life that is ours, not my family's." Kendra studied his face. "You are certain?" "I am certain that the only thing I want is you. Everything else is negotiable." Finn kissed her forehead. "But I will not make that decision alone. This is your land too now. What do you want?" Kendra thought about the cottage on Hartley Moor, small and wind-scoured, and theirs. She thought about the forge taking shape in the shed, the garden plot she had already planned, the sheep runs where she could work and feel useful. She thought about building something from nothing together. "I want the cottage," she said. "I want the life we started making." "This is beautiful, but it is not ours. Not really." Finn exhaled, and she saw the relief in his eyes. "Then we will find a tenant or a buyer, someone who will take care of it. Your mother might have ideas." "She will have many ideas. Eliza will too," Finn smiled. "We will ask them tomorrow. Tonight I just want to stand here with you and know that we won." They stood together at the gate as the last light faded from the sky and the stars came out overhead. The moor was quiet except for the distant bleating of sheep and the wind moving through the grass. Kendra leaned against Finn and felt the rightness of it, the way her body fit against his, the way his arm circled her waist like it had always been there. "I was so afraid," she said quietly. "When you showed me the mantle, I thought it was impossible. I thought loving you would cost everything." "It did cost everything," Finn said. "It cost my uncle his freedom and me my farm and both of us whatever small peace we had before." Kendra pulled back to look at him. "That is not what I meant. I know." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle. "But it is true anyway. Loving you cost me things I thought I wanted, and I have never been happier to lose anything in my life. The farm is dirt. You are real." Finn cupped her face in his hands. "You are everything real and good and worth having. The farm was just something I inherited. You are something I chose." Kendra kissed him, pouring 2 years of longing and fear and hope into it. He kissed her back like she was air and he was drowning. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the night had settled in fully around them. "Take me home," Kendra said. They walked back across the moor to the cottage, where the door stood open and a lamp burned in the window. Eliza had been there, Kendra realized. There were flowers on the table and a jug of fresh milk and a loaf of bread still warm from the oven. A note in Eliza's handwriting said, "Congratulations. Do not forget to eat." "Your sister is very practical," Kendra said, laughing. "She is insufferable," Finn said fondly. He closed the door and barred it, then turned to Kendra. The laughter faded from his face, replaced by something softer and more tentative. "Are you nervous?" "Yes," Kendra admitted. "Are you terrified?" Finn crossed to her and took her hands. "I do not want to hurt you. I do not want to do this wrong." "I do not think there is a wrong way," Kendra said. "Not if we are careful with each other." They were careful. They were tender and awkward and fumbling and perfect. Afterward they lay together in the narrow bed under the eaves, the mantle spread over them like a blanket, and listened to the wind on the moor. "I am going to fall asleep," Finn murmured. "I am sorry. I am not trying to be rude." "Sleep," Kendra said. She was half asleep herself, warm and content and utterly exhausted. "We have time," We have forever, Finn corrected, and then he was asleep, his breathing evening out into the slow rhythm of dreams. Kendra lay awake a little longer, watching the shadows move on the ceiling and listening to her husband breathe. Husband. The word still felt strange and wonderful. She thought about the path that had led here, from the day she had brought her pony to be shod with shaking hands to this moment, married and safe and home. She thought about Gareth sitting in a cell awaiting trial. She should feel guilty for that, or at least conflicted. Instead, she felt only a grim satisfaction. He had tried to steal Finn's future and failed. He would face justice. That was enough. The wind picked up outside, rattling the shutters. Kendra pulled the mantle higher and let her eyes fall shut. Tomorrow they would begin the work of building their life, but tonight she could rest. She was asleep before she finished the thought. The trial happened 3 weeks later at the assize court in the county seat. Finn and Kendra attended, sitting in the gallery and watching as Gareth Pardoe and his co-conspirators were arraigned on charges of forgery and attempted fraud. The evidence was damning. The witnesses broke under questioning and admitted they had signed the false codicil in exchange for money and whiskey. Gareth maintained his innocence, but the magistrate's report and Mr. Hewitt's testimony made his guilt impossible to deny. The judge sentenced Gareth to 7 years transportation to New South Wales. Voss and Bridger received 5 years each. All 3 men were led away in chains, and Finn watched them go with a face like carved stone. "You feel better?" Kendra asked as they left the courthouse. "No," Finn said. "But I feel finished. That is almost the same thing." They went home to the cottage, where the forge was now fully operational, and Finn had begun taking commissions from the coaching inn and the farms in the area. The work was steady if not lucrative, and Kendra had found employment helping with spring lambing on the surrounding moors. The money was tight, but it was enough. A month after the trial, a letter arrived from a solicitor in the county seat. The Chancery Court had ruled on the entail. Thornmere Farm was legally Finn's, free and clear of any conditions or restrictions. He could sell it, lease it, or live on it as he chose. Finn read the letter twice, then handed it to Kendra. "What do you think?" "I think we should talk to your mother," Kendra said. They walked down to the village that afternoon and found Mrs. Pardoe in her kitchen, elbow deep in bread dough. She listened as Finn explained the court's ruling, then wiped her hands on her apron and sat down heavily. "You are going to sell it," she said. "It was not a question." "I think so." "Unless you or Eliza want it." Finn leaned against the table. "I do not want to farm, Mother. I never have. You know that." "I do." Mrs. Pardoe sighed. "Your father always hoped you would take to the land, but I knew better. You have your grandfather's hands. You need to make things, not grow them." "Then you are not angry." "I am sad," Mrs. Pardoe said honestly. "That farm has been in this family for generations. It is hard to let it go, but I am not angry. You have to live your own life, Finn, and Kendra has to live hers." She looked at Kendra. "You do not want to farm either, do you?" "I like working with sheep," Kendra said carefully, "but I do not want to own land, not yet. Maybe someday when we have saved enough and found a place that suits us. But not now." Mrs. Pardoe nodded. "Then sell it. Use the money wisely. Build your forge and your life and be happy." She stood and hugged Finn hard. "Your father would understand. He wanted you happy more than he wanted you stuck on that damned moor." Finn returned the hug, his eyes wet. "Thank you." They found a buyer within a fortnight, a young couple from the next parish over who wanted to raise sheep and children in equal measure. The sale was finalized by midsummer, and the money went into a bank account in Finn's and Kendra's joint names. It was more money than either of them had ever seen, enough to expand the forge and buy tools and put aside something for the future. "We should celebrate," Eliza said when she heard. "Have a party. Invite everyone." "We are not inviting everyone," Finn said. "Most of the village still crosses the street when they see us coming." "Then invite the people who matter. Mother and me and the vicar's wife and Mr. Hewitt, the Carters from up the moor, that is everyone." They held the party at the cottage on a warm evening in early summer. The vicar's wife brought a cake, Mr. Hewitt brought wine, and the Carters brought a ham that must have cost them more than they could afford. Mrs. Pardoe and Eliza arrived with armloads of wildflowers and enough food to feed twice as many people. They ate and drank and talked as the sun set over the moor. Kendra sat beside Finn on the bench outside the cottage and watched the light fade and felt something settle in her chest that she finally recognized as peace. "Happy?" Finn asked quietly. "Very," Kendra said. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You? Very." He kissed the top of her head. "I keep thinking I should feel guilty about Gareth, or sad about the farm, but I do not. I just feel relieved. Relieved is good. Relieved is very good." Finn took her hand and laced their fingers together. "I was thinking we might start looking for an apprentice soon, someone young who wants to learn the trade." "That is a good idea." Kendra glanced at him. "Why do you sound nervous?" "Because I was also thinking that in a year or two we might have someone else who needs room in the cottage. Someone very small and very loud." Kendra felt her face heat. "Finn, only if you want," he said quickly. "I am not in a hurry, I just wanted you to know I have been thinking about it." "I have been thinking about it too," Kendra admitted, "but I am scared." "Of what?" "Of being a bad mother. Of not knowing what to do. Of raising a child who is half orc in a world that hates orcs." She swallowed hard. "Of losing you if something goes wrong." Finn pulled her close. "You will not lose me. And you will not be a bad mother. You are the kindest, strongest person I know. Our children will be lucky to have you." "Children, plural, I was thinking 3 or 4. Finn grinned at her expression. "Too many, ask me again in 5 years, Kendra said, but she was smiling too. The fear was still there, but it felt smaller now. Manageable. They sat together as the party went on around them, and Kendra thought about the future. Children who would have Finn's brown eyes and her green skin, who would grow up on the moor with the wind and the sheep, and the knowledge that they were loved. An apprentice who would learn the trade and carry it forward. A forge that would grow and prosper. A life built stone by stone, year by year together. It was not the life she had imagined when she had first come to the parish, alone and afraid and certain she would never belong. It was better. The guests left as the stars came out, carrying home the leftovers and leaving the cottage quiet. Finn and Kendra cleaned up in comfortable silence, washing dishes and banking the fire and locking the door. When everything was done, they climbed the ladder to the sleeping loft and fell into bed still wearing their good clothes. "I am too tired to move," Finn said. "Then do not move." Kendra curled against him, her head on his chest. "We can sleep like this. Your dress will be wrinkled." "I do not care." They fell asleep tangled together, and Kendra dreamed of children with brown eyes and green skin, running across the moor with a dog at their heels and the sun on their faces. Summer passed into autumn, and the work continued. Finn took on more commissions, shoeing horses for the coaching inn and making tools for the farmers. Kendra helped with the harvest and the autumn sheep shearing, and the money they earned went into the bank for the future. They bought a pony and a cart, a milk cow, 3 chickens. The cottage began to feel less like a temporary shelter and more like a permanent home. In October, Finn hired an apprentice, a boy named Peter from the village who was 14 and eager to learn. Peter was shy at first, nervous around Kendra, but he warmed up quickly when she showed him how to gentle a skittish horse and laughed at his jokes. By Christmas, he was eating dinner with them twice a week and calling Kendra Madam, in a way that made her feel impossibly old and impossibly pleased. Winter came, cold and bleak, and they huddled in the cottage with the fire burning and the wind howling outside. Finn worked in the forge when the weather allowed, and Kendra knitted socks and mittens and thought about the future. On the darkest nights, they lay in bed and talked about the children they wanted and the life they were building and the dreams they had barely dared to speak aloud before they found each other. "I want a girl first," Kendra said one night, "with your eyes." "I want a boy," Finn countered. "With your stubborn streak." "I am not stubborn. You are the most stubborn person I have ever met. You fell in love with a human in a parish that hates orcs and married him anyway. That is the definition of stubborn." Kendra poked him in the ribs. "You are the one who learned to weave." "That is worse. That is dedication." Finn caught her hand and kissed her fingers. "If we have a daughter, what will we name her? I do not know. Something strong. Something that sounds like she belongs." "She will belong," Finn said quietly. "We will make sure of it." Kendra kissed him, grateful beyond words for his certainty. "I love you. I love you too." Finn pulled her close. "Now sleep. Peter is coming early tomorrow and you know he will ask 1,000 questions before breakfast." Kendra laughed and settled against him, listening to the wind and the steady beat of his heart. Spring arrived slowly, thawing the frozen moor 1 inch at a time. The sheep began to lamb, and Kendra spent long days out on the hills helping the farmers with difficult births and orphaned lambs. Finn worked from dawn to dusk in the forge, and Peter proved himself capable and quick learning. The cottage was busy and loud and full of life. In April, Kendra missed her monthly bleeding. She did not say anything at first, afraid to hope. But when May came and her courses still had not, she walked down to the village and spoke quietly to the midwife. "How far along?" the midwife asked, examining her. 2 months, I think, maybe 3. 3, I would say." The midwife smiled. "You are healthy and strong, you should do well. Come see me once a month until the autumn, and we will make sure everything is progressing as it should." Kendra walked home in a daze, her hand pressed to her still flat stomach. A baby. Their baby. She thought about telling Finn and could not find the words. She thought about waiting and decided she could not bear to keep it secret even one more day. She found him in the forge, hammering out a horseshoe with Peter watching and taking notes. She waited until he set down the hammer and wiped his face, then said, "Can I talk to you?" Finn looked up, saw her expression, and set down his tools immediately. "Peter, take a break. Go get some water." Peter left, and Finn crossed to Kendra, his hands still hot from the forge. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong." Kendra took his hands and placed them on her stomach. "Everything is right. We are going to have a baby." Finn stared at her, his mouth open. "Are you certain?" "The midwife says I am 3 months along, due in the autumn." Kendra watched his face, searching for his reaction. "Are you happy?" "Happy," Finn laughed, the sound breaking in the middle. "I am terrified. I am overjoyed." "I am," he kissed her hard, then pulled back and kissed her again, softer. "I am so happy I cannot think straight." Kendra laughed too, relief flooding through her. "Good, because I am all of those things too." They told Peter that evening over dinner, and the boy's face lit up. "I am going to be an uncle, sort of, Finn agreed. "If you want to be." "I do." Peter grinned. "I will teach the baby all about horses." "The baby will be lucky to have you," Kendra said, and meant it. They told Finn's mother and Eliza the next day, and Mrs. Pardoe wept and hugged Kendra so hard she could barely breathe. Eliza was more pragmatic, launching into a list of things they would need and offering to sew baby clothes and warning Kendra about the perils of morning sickness. "I already had that," Kendra said. "It was awful." "It gets better," Eliza promised. "And then you get huge and uncomfortable and cannot sleep, but it is worth it, I promise." The summer passed in a blur of work and preparation. Kendra grew rounder, her body changing in ways that fascinated and terrified her. Finn was endlessly patient, rubbing her aching back and fetching her water in the middle of the night, and building a cradle in the forge that was sturdy enough to last for generations. "We do not know if it is a boy or a girl," Kendra pointed out when he showed her the cradle. "It does not matter," Finn said. "They will need somewhere to sleep either way." In September, on a cool morning when the moor was just beginning to turn gold, Kendra's pains began. The midwife came, and Finn's mother, and they settled in for what the midwife said would be a long labor. It was. Kendra labored through the day and into the night, gripping Finn's hand, so hard she thought she might break his fingers. He never complained, just stayed beside her and murmured encouragement and let her curse him for getting her into this situation. "I will never forgive you," she panted between contractions. "I know," Finn said calmly. "You can hate me later. Right now you need to breathe." Just before dawn, the baby was born. A boy, small and wrinkled and screaming at the top of his lungs. The midwife cleaned him and wrapped him and placed him in Kendra's arms, and she looked down at his tiny green face and fell completely in love. "He is perfect," she whispered. "He is," Finn said, his voice thick. He touched the baby's head, his hand shaking. "He looks like you. He has your nose. Poor thing." Finn laughed, and there were tears on his face. What should we name him? They had argued about names for months, unable to agree. But now, looking at her son, Kendra knew. "Varen," she said, "for new beginnings." "Varen," Finn repeated. He looked at her, his eyes bright. "It is perfect. He is perfect. You are perfect." Kendra smiled, exhausted and sore and happier than she had ever been. "We did it." "You did it," Finn corrected. "I just held your hand. You did more than that." Kendra leaned against him, the baby cradled between them. "You gave me a family, you gave me a home, you gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Finn said. He kissed her forehead, then the baby's. "And this is just the beginning." Varen grew quickly, a sturdy baby with green skin and brown eyes and a temper that could shake the rafters when he was displeased. Kendra had never been so tired or so content. She and Finn took turns walking him when he cried in the night, and Peter helped entertain him during the day when they needed to work. The village slowly warmed to them. It was impossible to hate a baby, even one with green skin and tiny tusks that would grow in later. People who had crossed the street to avoid Kendra began to stop and coo over Varen in his basket. The vicar's wife knitted him a blanket. Even old Tom Bridger, who had once made signs against evil, smiled when he saw the baby and said he had his father's chin. "We are becoming respectable," Finn said one evening, watching Kendra nurse Varen by the fire. "We were always respectable," Kendra said. "They are just finally noticing." Winter came again, and they settled into the rhythm of family life. The forge prospered. Peter was promoted from apprentice to journeyman and began taking on his own commissions. Varen learned to sit up, then to crawl, then to pull himself upright on the furniture and take wobbling steps. In the spring, when Varen was 8 months old, Kendra discovered she was pregnant again. She told Finn on a morning when the moor was carpeted with wildflowers and the sun was warm on her face. "Again," Finn said, his eyes wide. "Already." "I did warn you I was fertile," Kendra said, laughing at his expression. "I thought you were joking." Finn pulled her close, careful not to jostle Varen, who was asleep on her hip. "Are you happy?" "Exhausted," Kendra said honestly. "But yes, happy." The second baby, another boy, was born in the dead of winter. They named him Donal, and he was quieter than his brother, content to watch the world with solemn brown eyes and nurse and sleep. Varen, now a year and a half old, was fascinated by the new baby and tried to help at every opportunity. "Gentle," Kendra said for the 100th time, redirecting Varen's enthusiastic pats. He is small. You have to be soft. Soft, Varen repeated and promptly smacked his brother on the head. Finn scooped Varen up before he could do it again. Let us go help Peter in the forge. Your mother needs to rest. Kendra watched them go, Varen chattering happily in Finn's arms, and felt the familiar swell of gratitude. This life, messy and loud and exhausting as it was everything she had ever wanted. The years passed. Varen and Donal grew into sturdy, happy boys who played on the moor and helped in the forge and learned to gentle horses from Peter. Kendra took on more shepherding work, bringing the boys with her when they were old enough and teaching them the ways of sheep and dogs. Finn's business expanded, and they hired a second apprentice to keep up with demand. On a spring morning 5 years after they had married, Kendra and Finn stood outside the cottage and looked at the life they had built. The forge was busy, smoke rising from the chimney. The garden was planted, neat rows of vegetables pushing up through the soil. The boys were in the paddock with Peter, learning to shoe a patient pony. You ever regret it? Kendra asked. Losing the farm, marrying me, all of it. Finn turned to her, his expression incredulous. Never, not once. Not for a single second. We could have had an easier life. We could have had a lonelier life, a smaller life, a life where I did what was expected and you stayed invisible and we never found each other. Finn took her hand. This is not easier, but it is ours. And I would not trade it for anything. Kendra leaned against him, watching their sons laugh in the sunlight. Neither would I. They stood together in the place they had made, surrounded by the family they had built, and knew they were home. The mantle Finn had woven still hung above their hearth, the blue and russet stripes as bright as the day he had given it to her. Kendra wore it on cold evenings and special occasions, and every time she slid it over her shoulders, she remembered the way her hands had shaken and the way Finn had looked at her and the promise he had made. Wear this and you are mine. Not a claim. A vow. A beginning. And every day since had been a continuation of that promise, woven together thread by thread into a life neither of them could have imagined alone. On Varen's 6th birthday, they held a party at the cottage. Half the village came, bringing gifts and food and good wishes. The boys ran wild on the moor with the other children, and Kendra stood beside Finn and watched them play. 6 years old, Finn said. How is that possible? I have no idea. Kendra shook her head. It feels like yesterday that you were building his cradle. And now he is big enough to help in the forge. Peter has been teaching him to work the bellows. Finn smiled. He is good at it. He is good at everything, Kendra said proudly. So is Donal. They watched as Varen tripped over a tussock and went sprawling, then picked himself up and kept running without a pause. Donal, always more cautious, skirted the tussock and followed his brother at a careful distance. They are so different, Finn observed. They are perfect, Kendra said. As the sun set and the guests departed, Kendra and Finn gathered their tired sons and brought them inside. They washed faces and hands, changed them into night clothes, and tucked them into the beds Finn had built. Varen was asleep before his head hit the pillow. Donal lasted a little longer, his eyes drifting shut as Kendra sang a lullaby her own mother had sung. When both boys were asleep, Kendra and Finn climbed down from the loft and sat together by the fire. The mantle was draped over Kendra's shoulders, and Finn had his arm around her waist. Happy? He asked, the question he had asked 1,000 times before. Always, Kendra said, the answer she always gave. And it was true. She was happy. Not because life was easy or perfect or free from struggle, but because she had found the one person who saw her as she was and loved her anyway. Because she had built a home and a family and a future against all odds. Because every day she woke up beside Finn and knew she was exactly where she belonged. The fire crackled. The wind whispered across the moor. The boys slept soundly overhead. And Kendra and Finn sat together in the warm cottage, wrapped in the mantle that had bound their lives together, and knew they had everything they needed. The story that had started with shaking hands and a quietly woven promise had become a life, rich and full and theirs. And though challenges would come and years would pass and the moor would see many more seasons turn, one thing would remain constant. They were home. They were together. And they were exactly where they were meant to be.